a short kind of series at the moment, and it's called A Significant Role in a Significant Story. And I'm sure you can all agree with me that the story of Jesus' birth and the nativity story as we know it is a significant story, isn't it? But how much do we actually know about the supporting cast around Jesus? You know, Dan shared with us last week about shepherds and their role, and how they just went when they were called. They just went. And today I'm going to be talking a bit about the wise men and what they did, because I'm not sure about you guys, but me personally, I haven't really looked into how they would kind of make a difference on my life and what I could learn from their story. But as I've been going through this, there's so much that we can learn and take away from it. So today, the way I'm going to go through this, I'm just going to read a passage in the Bible which shares a bit of the story of the wise men going to see Jesus, and then look at what we know about the wise men and what we can learn from their story. So I'm going to start by reading in Matthew 2, verse 1 to 12, if you want to join. And I'm reading from the New Living Translation. So it says, Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting with the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem in Judea," they said, "for this is what the prophet wrote. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah. For a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd for my people Israel." Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them that the time when the star first appeared. Then he told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too." After this interview with the wise men, they went on their way. And the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over a place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw a child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. So what do we know then about the wise men? My mum, Meryl, said there was it 3 wise men. So in our traditional nativity story, we are led to believe that there's 3 wise men, but actually in the Bible it doesn't tell us that, does it? And I believe that they've come to that conclusion because there was 3 gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And also in different translations then, so the wise men were also referred to as magi. And if I'm being honest, I had no idea what that was. So I had a little bit of research, looked on Google to see what that could tell me. And the magi were a group of people who would study the stars. But they wouldn't just study the stars, they also believed in the movement of the stars, that they had a significant importance within history and within life itself. We know that these wise men, or these magi, travelled from the east. Again, we don't know exactly where they've come from, but we know that they have come from the east. And when I've had a look into that myself, it says they've come from around about like Iraq or Iran area. Around there anyway. And as I'm going through this, right guys, just so you know, I've kind of grappled with it all because actually there's not a lot of specifics about these wise men, and I've looked into it and lots of like different places tell you different things. So I'm just trying to go off what the Bible is telling us. And what, with them kind of traveling from the east, I did a bit of a guesstimation so I could fully grasp in my head how far they would have travelled. And it was around about 1,000 miles they would have travelled. And they wouldn't have been able to jump on a plane or jump in a car or on their motorbike to be able to get there. It would purely be either by foot or by animal, whether it be a donkey or a camel or a racehorse or whatever. So it would have taken them a long time to get there, and it would have been a long old journey. And again, to try and see it in today's version, or from Swansea then, so I did a little Google Maps and did about 1,000 miles from Swansea, and it's about from Swansea to Madrid on foot. So that's how far they would have had to have travelled to get from the eastern area all the way to Bethlehem. So we also know that they knew that this star had meant that Jesus had been born. So we know that they knew a little bit of the scriptures, but also with where they would have been from. So they would have been from the eastern areas. They wouldn't have generally been Jews, so they would have been Gentiles. So they wouldn't have been brought up knowing all of the scriptures and the prophecies. They wouldn't have been brought up kind of learning all of that knowledge. Whereas we know that they knew about Jesus, so they would have known some of the prophecies of Jesus. And in Numbers 24 verse 17 it says, "I see him, but not here and not now. I perceive him, but far in the distant future. A star will rise from Jacob, a scepter will emerge from Israel." And a scepter is like a symbol of a royal authority. And so they would have known some of it. And what I thought was not funny, I guess, but they didn't know all of the scripture, didn't know all of the prophecies, because actually they made a wrong turn, didn't they? So they were on their way to find Jesus, and they ended up in the palace in Jerusalem. So from what I've gathered from it is that they would have made a calculated decision, that it says in that prophecy that a star will rise from Israel, and you have Jerusalem, which is the capital of Israel, and in Jerusalem there was the palace. So and that's where you would usually find the royal people, would be in the palace. So that's where they went. But again, when they got there, obviously they were told different and they needed to go elsewhere. And then finally then we hear, which I found interesting, because in our traditional story we were led to believe that they're all at this manger with a baby Jesus, but actually in the Bible it says that they arrived at a house to see the child, not a baby. And that kind of gives us a concept of how long it would have taken them from the time that they saw the star appear to try and figure out what that meant and linked it with the scriptures that they knew, and then set off on their journey, which would have taken a long time, a very long time. I did try and do a bit of calculations. It got very confusing. Tom did help me, and we worked it out to be about 33 days. That's 10 hours every day. But then when I thought about it, that's not when they're going off in the wrong direction. We know they went the wrong direction once. They may have made a few more wrong directions, and sometimes they might have had to take a break for a bit longer. So it would have taken them a long time to get there. And it's led to believe that he would have been around 2, or between 2 and under, when they finally got to see him. So what can we learn then about these wise men? So last week when Dan shared, he explained that he talked about the shepherds and talked about their significant role within this story. And he shared that the shepherds would have been very low class citizens, like they would have been on par with tax collectors and very kind of disregarded in society. Whereas you have these wise men who would have been on the other end, on the other scale. So they usually, these wise men or the magi would form part of a group of people along with like religious leaders or teachers of the law, and they would usually be like a group of people who would have been around the royalty, so they'd be able to consult them on different things if they had any questions or any dreams. So they'd be in that kind of company, whereas we heard last week that the shepherds would have been a very different kind of group of people altogether. And from that, I know Dan shared it last week as well, but actually God doesn't look at our class or our kind of societal place in our countries of where we can be, if we can do his works or not. You know, it says that actually in Samuel, 1 Samuel 16 verse 17, the Lord was talking to Samuel and he said to him, "Do not judge by his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not see things the way that you see him, but people judge on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And from that, you know, we learn that actually it doesn't matter where we stand in society today, as long as we have a willing heart and we're obeying God and we want to kind of grow closer to him, then he's going to use us to kind of fulfill his work. Again, like I said earlier, they wouldn't have been Jewish people, they would have been Gentiles, so we don't know their full story and we don't know what they would have known growing up. You know, wouldn't know what they knew about God and about the prophecies, but actually with the little that they did know, you know, they acted on that and they wanted, you know, they left their homes, their families, their work to travel 1,000 miles to go and worship the King. And I think that's quite amazing, isn't it? And you think about our lives now, what do we give up? What do we kind of put aside to be able to follow God's plan for our lives and listen to his calling on our lives and act on that? And that really challenged me, that did. And what that made me think about as well is the leading priests that were around Herod and the teachers of the law. They knew all of the prophecies, they knew all of the scriptures, yet they weren't the ones that were searching and seeking to find Jesus to kind of worship him. They weren't the ones that had left everything to go and bow down and worship him. And the Magi did, you know, they were the ones, the wise men, they were the ones that kind of left all their things and they went to go and worship God and present him with gifts. And again, that made me think about, I wonder what those wise men thought. So when they went to Herod and they were told that, oh, you've come to the wrong place, you know, it's in Bethlehem, that's where the Messiah is going to be born. I wonder what they were thinking. Were they thinking, well, if you know this and you believe this, why are you not going there to worship him yourselves? And again, that made me reflect on my life and maybe think about, you know, am I acting on the things that I believe in as well? Am I, you know, what's the word? Am I walking the walk as well as talking the talk? What do the people around me who are non-believers, what with my friends, my family, my colleagues who don't believe in Jesus, who don't know the Bible or don't know the truths I know, can they see a difference in me? Can they see that I am acting and I am faithful to what I believe? And that really challenged me, just to kind of see, am I living a life that is pleasing to God? Am I listening to God's word and his plans in my life? And am I being obedient and faithful to that? You know, in Hebrews 11 verse 1, it says that faith means being sure of things we hope for and knowing that something is real, even if we do not see it. You know, do I live that out in my life? And that's a real big challenge and something I need to continue to put on my life and keep questioning myself. There must have been times for these wise men when they were on their journey that it just got hard. You know, they traveled approximately 1,000 miles, okay, and that's a long distance, even if you are traveling by car or by plane. But they would have been traveling by foot or an animal, so that's going to be a long distance. They went to the wrong place. Like I said earlier, we know they went to one wrong place. They went to the palace. They could have gone diverted off track quite a few times. And I wonder whether, you know, during that time they thought, oh, what are we doing? Shall we just go back home? You know, we're never going to get there. This has taken forever. We've left our family back there. We've left our work, our friends. Shall we just go back home? But actually, we know they didn't, did they? They carried on going until they found what they were looking for, and that was Jesus. And again, you know, we have these things in our lives, don't we? We're not promised when we become Christians, that our life is going to be easy. You know, it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, we're going to get bumps in the road, but that doesn't mean that we just give it all up and we just turn around and we throw in the towel. But actually, these are the times we need to lean into Jesus. We need to, you know, speak to Jesus, build that relationship with him, and get around our Christian brothers and sisters for that extra support. We need to be confident in our heart of hearts that we know that God loves us and that he's never going to forsake us. When we are struggling, when we're going through difficult times, whether that's personally, in your work, in your friendships, whatever, you know, God is with us. And we need to know that he's never going to lead us, and that he's always going to guide us. We know that when the wise men came to the house and they saw Jesus, their response was just to bow down and worship him. And once they had done that, they gave him the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and they would have been earthly treasures. And I think if that was me, how would I have responded? Would I have fallen down on my knees in complete adoration? And again, it made me think about my prayer life now, or my time that I spent with Jesus now. I may not be physically with him, but do I fall down on my knees? Do I respect my relationship with God of being something as amazing as it is, and not just kind of disregard it as and when I want to speak to God? You know, do I put him at the forefront of my life? Are my eyes focused on God at all times? And with the gifts that they gave to Jesus, you know, we are called to give gifts, aren't we? We have gifts given to us, from God, and we are called to use those gifts. And just like the wise men gave gifts to God, God has given gifts to us, and we're called to use them. You know, there are many verses in the Bible that tell us about using our gifts. And for example, in 1 Peter 4 verse 10, he says, God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. So are we doing this? Are we using the gifts that God has given us? You heard of the phrase, if you don't use it, you lose it. You know, God has given us a gift for a purpose. He's given us a gift to be able to, you know, for his glory, to be able to support, get around one another. And sometimes I might be saying these things about gifts and having a gift, but actually, if you don't know what your gift is, then that's okay, but don't leave it at that. You know, pray about it. Ask God what gifts he has given you to kind of fulfill his glory. Ask the people around you to pray with you, and people around you might be able to identify different gifts that they feel that God also can see that God has given you. And finally, the last thing that we learn about the wise men is that they acted on what they knew and what they believed to be true. And then at the end, when they were supposed to go back to Herod and tell him about where Jesus was, because he was supposedly wanted to go and worship Jesus, but we know that not to be true, they listened to the Spirit of God when he came to them in a dream and told them not to go back that way. And they didn't. You know, they listened to God and they acted on that. And again, am I doing that? Am I listening to God's voice and his word in my life and his plans for my life? And am I acting on that? Or am I doing what I want because it's comfortable and it's easy? So just to summarize then what we've heard, or what I've learned, and what I hope that I've been able to share with you guys today, is that these wise men were very obedient and faithful men. Even though times were hard, that didn't mean that they gave up. And again, we go through tough times in our lives, and that doesn't mean that we give up. It means that we continue to search and we continue to go on this journey. And what I do know, and that what I will end this talk on, is that we know that we have a true and a faithful God. We know that his promises are true for us and that he's always going to be with us. We know that even during our hard times, or when we get a bit lost in the road, that he is still there guiding us. And like those wise men, we need to just continue as faithful and obedient servants to God and search for that light. So I'm going to pray for us all now, just as I'm ending. And as I finish praying, we're going to go into a little time of worship. And we're going to listen to a song called Oceans by Hillsongs. And it just talks about trust and faith in God. And I love that song. And I think it's one that kind of really brings me to think about my life as well. So we're going to go straight into that after I've prayed for us. God, thank you that you love us, Lord, and that you are always going to be there to guide us. Thank you that we're able to learn so much from your word, Lord, and that even when maybe we don't think that we're able to learn things from little stories or big stories, even, God, that actually there's a lot for us to learn and take away from. But I pray that we continue to search for your light, Lord, in our lives. And like I said, even when we are struggling, Lord, we lean into you closer and closer. I thank you that you love us and that you're always going to be with us, Jesus. Amen.